The summer heat was suffocating, pressing down on the quiet suburban neighborhood like an invisible, oppressive blanket. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead, his frustration building with each passing minute. He stared at the gate leading to his own backyard, a gate that now seemed more like a barrier to his sanctuary than an entrance. It had been exactly 3 weeks since he and his wife, Elena, had moved into the seemingly idyllic cul-de-sac. The house was everything they dreamed of, a spacious mid-century modern home with a pool that had been the primary selling point during their house hunt. Marcus had imagined lazy summer afternoons, the sound of splashing water, and peaceful relaxation. Instead, he found himself embroiled in a neighborhood conflict that defied all logic. The trouble had started shortly after they moved in. Their next-door neighbor, a woman in her late 50s with carefully coiffed blonde hair and a permanent scowl, had been watching them with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable from day one. He'd catch her peering through her perfectly trimmed curtains, her eyes tracking their every move. Marcus remembered the first interaction vividly. It was a Saturday morning when he was unpacking the last of their moving boxes. The woman, Karen, he would later learn, had marched up to their property line, her manicured finger pointing accusingly. "This neighborhood has standards," she had declared, her voice sharp and cold. "We don't appreciate changes." The changes, she referred to, were mysterious. Marcus and Elena had done nothing more than move in, clean up the slightly overgrown yard, and prepare to enjoy their new home. They were a professional couple in their mid-30s, a software engineer, she an architect, hardly the type to disrupt a suburban landscape. But Karen saw things differently. Today was supposed to be simple. The temperature had climbed to a brutal 95 degrees, and Marcus desperately wanted to cool off in the pool. It was his pool on his property, purchased with money he and Elena had saved for years. Yet here he was standing at the gate, feeling like an intruder in his own backyard. The padlock was new, definitely not something that had been there when they purchased the house. Marcus was certain of it. He distinctly remembered the home inspection, the realtor walking them through the backyard, showing off the pool as a key selling point. Now a gleaming new lock prevented him from accessing what was legally and rightfully his. His phone buzzed. It was Elena. "Did you call the locksmith?" she asked, her voice tinged with the same mixture of anger and bewilderment that Marcus was feeling. "Not yet," he responded, running a hand through his hair. "Something's not right here. I'm going to figure out what's going on." Little did Marcus know that his quest for answers would lead to a confrontation that would make local gossip look like a mild distraction. The suburban battlefield was about to become very real, and Karen was preparing her first offensive. The local locksmith arrived within the hour, a weathered man named Frank with kind eyes and a puzzled expression. As he examined the lock, Marcus explained the situation, showing him the property deed and recent purchase documents. "This is the strangest thing I've seen in 30 years of work," Frank muttered, running his fingers along the gate's edge. He pointed out subtle scratches around the lock mechanism, signs of recent tampering that suggested the padlock hadn't been installed by any official entity. Just as Frank prepared to cut the lock, a sharp voice cut through the afternoon heat. "Don't you dare touch that!" Karen emerged from her side yard, her smartphone already raised, recording the entire scene. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "This is my property," he said calmly, holding up the deed. "I have every right to access my pool." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You people aren't supposed to be here," she hissed, her finger hovering over what Marcus suspected was the local police department's number. The "you people" comment hung in the air, loaded with an implication that made Marcus uncomfortable. He and Elena had worked hard to achieve this moment, their first home, a symbol of their success and dreams. They were a mixed-race couple, Marcus with his African-American and Puerto Rican heritage, Elena with her Korean-American background, and they were painfully aware of how some neighbors might react to their presence in this predominantly white suburban neighborhood. Frank the locksmith looked between Marcus and Karen, sensing the tension. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen professionally, "unless you have legal documentation preventing access, I'm going to help this gentleman access his property." Before Karen could respond, she did something unexpected. She pressed call on her phone, her eyes locked on Marcus. "Police, I'd like to report a trespasser." Marcus couldn't believe what was happening. Elena pulled up in her driveway just then, witnessing the standoff. She quickly joined Marcus, her architectural drafting tubes still slung over her shoulder from work. "What's going on?" Elena demanded, her voice a mix of confusion and rising anger. Karen's response was swift and calculated. "These people are trying to break into a restricted property," she told the 911 dispatcher, her voice trembling with what sounded like rehearsed fear. The locksmith looked at Marcus and Elena, his earlier professional demeanor now mixed with genuine concern. "I've seen a lot of strange things," he whispered, "but this is something else." As sirens began to approach in the distance, Marcus felt a mixture of disbelief and mounting frustration. What should have been a simple afternoon of trying to cool off in his own pool was rapidly turning into a nightmare that threatened to expose the ugly undercurrents of their supposedly peaceful neighborhood. Alina squeezed Marcus's hand, a silent signal of support. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. But neither of them could have predicted just how complicated this situation was about to become. Two police cruisers pulled up simultaneously, their lights cutting through the late afternoon sunshine. Marcus and Alina stood side by side, their hands intertwined, watching as 4 officers approached, 2 from each vehicle. The lead officer, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and a name tag reading Officer Rodriguez, stepped forward first. Her eyes swept across the scene, the locksmith at the gate, Karen standing nearby with her phone still raised. "What seems to be the problem?" Officer Rodriguez asked, her tone professional but guarded. Karen spoke immediately, her voice quivering with manufactured distress. "These people are trying to break into a restricted property. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and I know something isn't right." Marcus pulled out their property documents, the deed, the recent purchase papers, a home inspection report. "This is our house," he explained calmly. "We bought it 3 weeks ago. This pool is on our property." Officer Rodriguez began reviewing the documents, her experienced eyes scanning each page carefully. The other officers hung back, observing the scene with a mix of curiosity and mild skepticism. Alina stepped forward, her architectural precision showing how she laid out their documentation. "We can prove every aspect of our purchase," she added, her voice steady and clear. "We've done everything by the book." Karen's demeanor began to crack. Her initial confidence seemed to waver under the professional scrutiny of Officer Rodriguez. The officer's measured responses suggested she'd seen similar neighborhood disputes before and wasn't about to be swayed by hysterics. "Ms." Officer Rodriguez turned to Karen, waiting for her last name. "Henderson," Karen responded, her voice losing some of its earlier bravado. The locksmith, Frank, stepped forward. "I can confirm they're trying to access their own property," he interjected. "This lock appears to have been installed recently and without any official authorization." What happened next would become the turning point of the entire incident. Officer Rodriguez took a closer look at the lock, then at Karen. Her professional demeanor shifted slightly, a merely imperceptible tightening around her eyes that suggested she was piecing together something more significant than a simple property dispute. "Ms. Henderson," she said slowly, "do you have any documentation suggesting you have the right to restrict access to this property?" Karen's confident facade began to crumble. Her phone, which had been her weapon of choice moments ago, now seemed to weigh heavily in her hand. She stammered, looking for words, finding none. Marcus and Elena exchanged a quick glance. They had no idea what was about to unfold, but they could sense the tide was turning. The neighborhood, which had been quietly watching from behind curtains and over fences, seemed to hold its collective breath. What had started as a simple attempt to use a backyard pool was transforming into something far more complex, a confrontation that would expose layers of tension beneath the surface of suburban tranquility. Officer Rodriguez was about to reveal something that would change everything, not just for Marcus and Alina, but potentially for the entire neighborhood. The silence stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap any moment. Officer Rodriguez pulled out a small notebook, her movements deliberate and measured. "Ms. Henderson," she began, "can you explain why you placed a lock on a property you don't own?" Karen's composure completely disintegrated. Her phone slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering against the concrete driveway. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood," she stammered, but the words rang hollow. What unfolded next was a story that would become neighborhood legend. A tale of property, prejudice, and a decades-old dispute that had festered beneath the manicured lawns and pristine fences. Officer Rodriguez revealed that this wasn't the first time Karen had attempted to interfere with property rights in the neighborhood. She explained that there was an ongoing investigation into a pattern of harassment against new homeowners, particularly those of color, that Karen had been systematically orchestrating for years. "We've had multiple complaints," Officer Rodriguez said, her voice low but firm. "Unauthorized locks, false police reports, attempts to intimidate new residents. Your property is just the latest in a long line of similar incidents." Marcus and Alina listened in stunned silence as the full picture emerged. Karen had been operating a one-woman campaign of neighborhood gatekeeping, using false claims and bureaucratic manipulation to try and control who could and couldn't move into the area. The locksmith, Frank, added his own piece of the puzzle. "I've seen locks like this before," he interjected. "Someone's been buying these from a local hardware store and installing them strategically. It's not just about one house, it's a pattern." Alina's architectural background kicked in, and she began to piece together the larger narrative. "This isn't just about our pool," she said quietly. "This is about who gets to belong." Officer Rodriguez nodded, confirming what Marcus and Elena had suspected. Karen had been systematically trying to create barriers for new homeowners using a combination of false reports, strategic lock placements, and intimidation tactics. The other officers began to secure evidence, a lock, Karen's phone records, documentation of previous complaints. Karen stood silent now, the fight completely drained from her. "Ms. Henderson," Officer Rodriguez said finally, "you'll need to come with us. We have some questions about your recent activities in the neighborhood." As Karen was quietly escorted to the police cruiser, the neighborhood began to emerge. Windows opened, people stepped onto their porches. Years of whispered suspicions of witnessed but unreported incidents were now coming to light. Marcus looked at Alina, a mixture of emotions crossing his face. Anger, relief, disbelief, they were all there. "We just wanted to use our pool," he said, a hint of irony in his voice. Alina squeezed his hand. "And now we've uncovered something much bigger." The afternoon sun continued to beat down on the quiet street, but something had fundamentally changed. The veneer of suburban peace had been stripped away, revealing the complex tensions that had been lurking just beneath the surface. As the police cars pulled away and Marcus and Alina looked at their pool, no longer just a place to cool off, but a symbol of something far more significant. They had fought for the right to belong, and they had won. 1 month after the incident, Marcus and Alina's backyard pool became more than just a personal sanctuary. It transformed into a symbol of resilience and community healing. The local news had picked up the story, bringing to light the systematic harassment Karen Henderson had been conducting for years. Her arrest had triggered a broader investigation into similar complaints from other homeowners in the area. Multiple families, many of color, came forward with their own stories of intimidation and blocked access. The neighborhood association called an emergency meeting. Marcus and Alina, initially reluctant to become the center of attention, found themselves inadvertent leaders of a movement demanding change. Alina used her professional connections to help draft new bylaws that would prevent future discrimination, while Marcus worked with local community groups to create awareness about property rights and neighborhood inclusivity. Their next-door neighbors, people who had previously remained silent, began to approach them. An elderly couple who had lived on the street for decades shared their own uncomfortable memories of how the neighborhood had resisted integration over the years. A young family apologized for not speaking up earlier, admitting they had witnessed Karen's behavior but feared confrontation. The pool itself became a gathering point. Marcus and Alina started hosting monthly community barbecues, inviting neighbors of all backgrounds. Where tension had once existed, conversations now flowed freely. Children splashed in the water. Adults shared stories, and the barriers that Karen had tried so hard to maintain began to crumble. Karen's legal troubles mounted. Beyond the criminal charges for harassment and filing false police reports, she faced civil lawsuits from multiple families she had targeted over the years. The community that she had tried to control was now holding her accountable. "We didn't want to be activists," Marcus told a local reporter. "We just wanted to enjoy our home. But sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing up for others too." Alina added, "Our pool is more than just water and tiles. It's a place of connection, breaking down walls, literally and figuratively." The local police department launched a comprehensive review of how they handled neighborhood disputes, using Marcus and Alina's case as a catalyst for change. Officer Rodriguez, who had been instrumental in exposing Karen's actions, received commendations for her thorough and compassionate handling of the investigation. As summer approached again, the neighborhood looked different. Barriers had been removed, not just the physical locks Karen had installed, but the unspoken barriers of mistrust and division. Marcus and Alina's purchase of the house was no longer seen as an intrusion, but as a welcome addition to a community learning to embrace true diversity. On the first really hot day of summer, Marcus looked out over the pool. Children from various families played together, parents chatted, and the sound of laughter replaced the previous atmosphere of tension. What had begun as a personal nightmare had become a powerful story of community transformation. The padlock was long gone, replaced by an open gate, a metaphor for the neighborhood's journey. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most unexpected battles lead to the most meaningful changes. Their simple desire to use their own pool had become something much larger, a testament to the power of standing ground, speaking truth, and refusing to be intimidated.